Welcome, Coach Conversation, Series 2, Episode 9. There's a new girl in the house.
And we're not talking about your new kicks.
Not the sneakers.
Yay. New job alert. Oh my goodness. Yeah. First full day yesterday, full time. It still doesn't feel like I've made a transition because there's lots of things floating on in my head. But yeah, cool to be in there, get my feet under the table in the next week or two and month or two and see what madness I'm getting myself into.
So let me get the title right. Head of Performance and Wellbeing. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the title. Pretty much made up title because I wanted to look at the well-being aspect. I know there's loads of head of performances and well-being managers, and there's, all that area around kind of mental skills and performance that I've been used to exploring. But I just wanted to see if we could bring something in that's like performance through well-being, and where we have some little bits and pieces around policy education in place, but just for it to be an enjoyable experience. Can we win well? Can we actually perform, do all the nitty gritty stuff that I love around performance and competition and being competitive and thriving, but through like rich, caring connections? So that's the challenge.
Wow. Sounds fun.
Watch this space.
Yeah, well, look, this is, look forward to hearing how it grows and how you grow as part of that process. It should be cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, excited.
And we're full on into week 3, last week, whatever it is, of the Olympic Games.
I know. It's been
landing with you? What you thinking?
Like, I'm not expressive wise, I'm not a very emotional person. But what I've noticed in the last few weeks is I'm just sitting there and certain things that are happening, I'm just welling up. And I started to try and see without over analyzing it, like, what was it? Was it the fact that someone was going to go a medal? And I was like, oh, achieving their dreams. Oh, amazing. Or, oh, just missing a medal. Oh, so sad. But like the bigger picture is that it's the camaraderie. It's the effort and knowing that it's a 5-year cycle that some people have been through. It's hearing not all, the majority of sports, or seeing, thank their coaches. And we spent so long, like fortunately enough, actually working with some of the coaches that are out in Tokyo, but listening to their stories and their kind of selfless roots to support the athletes. And then it coming to fruition. Adam Peaty is kind of, the face almost of GB at the Olympics at the moment. All the credit going to his team, the belief that's been instilled, the people around him, Mel Marshall, which we know well through UK coaching and beyond, like, and all the different athletes kind of going back to the coach, and they're their first point when they come off, like Emily Campbell in the weightlifting the other day, like so emotional, straight into the coach's arms, like, yes, we did it, So all of that kind of, making the little flutters. What have you picked up over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, that I think definitely I've seen and heard more link between athletes and coaches. I would like to see more coaches interviewed. I mean, that's just clearly an entirely selfish bias of the world as we're sat here talking about coaching. But that might come later on, and we can follow that through. But there's definitely been a real richness of athletes talking about the impact that the coaches have had on them, things that they've done, etc., like that. Max Whitlock talking about having a pommel horse in his garden through COVID. That's likely something that a coach has sorted out with him to be able to do and keep coaching him through that period and stuff. So but yeah, there's definitely a strong recognition of that, which is brilliant, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And like, do you know what else is I completely agree about the coaches. And I think some of the channels have gotten an opportunity to get family and friends and all that in, which is creating a bigger atmosphere. But like the chain of success or the journey that the athletes have been on, it'd be great to see what part those coaches have played. And I know during the week I saw that UK Coaching went to some of the areas like in Peckham after the BMX. So that's really cool. Where are the people coming from? What conditions are they training in? What journey have they been on? Brilliant. But other things to spark off, like the table tennis. I was watching the table tennis, and the Chinese doubles team only play together in competition, never train outside. It's just literally
Okay.
when competition is on. And that just got me thinking about what I thought should happen in team or individual sports and what was happening, and actually the success they could have. And then the pandemic, and some of the coaches saying some of their athletes thrived through the pandemic. And was there some more about the coaching element of that we'd missed, or maybe we could unpick at some stage post Olympics to see the ways of working and the ways of connecting. The Tom Dean interview with the family around the competitiveness with the sister and the sibling element. I know there's loads of research around that, but just some other cool little elements of those interviews that got me thinking about the way we operate and work, and then what's a little bit to the left and right of that we could explore post Olympics to get a bit creative.
Yeah, definitely. Although I do want to pick up on the ones to the kind of slightly left and right, but then the extreme right. So you may well have seen the let me get his name right. This Australian swimmer, Ariane Titmus, bringing home gold in the 200-meter freestyle. The coach, Aussie guy, long flowing surfer locks, Dean Boxall. His response to an athlete doing well. I don't know how I would describe his response other than over enthusiasm. I'm not really sure how I describe it, but maybe with your wizardry we could put, you know. But it was just like, wow. I mean, what's the impact of a coach going crazy? What do you make of that?
Well, you know, the first time I watched it, I was like, oh my goodness, the passion. But then I wondered what kind of relationship they have. And I wondered, if this is a peak, and I appreciate it's the Olympics, and people are like, yeah, don't be ridiculous. Of course, he's so excited. But what's the troughs? What are the bad days? If, you know, is this just a once off? Whoa, we weren't expecting it. You're amazing. I'm absolutely losing it. And that's that moment. Or is there something in that behavior and relationship that appears on a regular basis? If I'm thinking of a basketball perspective now, just because it's easier at the moment, but like if I had a coach on the sideline who behaved like that for the peaks and troughs of a game, I would be emotionally unstable. I would have to work really hard to at least regulate, because this is what was coming at. But with the nature of it being one race, the race is over, does that change then for the next race or the next competition, the perception of demand and ability, as Neil Roach talked about before? Because now, not only has the athlete achieved and there's been a platform and this is fantastic, but now the coaches showed this passion. There's like, did he expect her to win or not win? Did he expect that the next competition now is bigger, better, greater stuff? There's a little bit of uncertainty around that kind of behavior and the volatility of it. But, you know, I completely see that it's an Olympics and, you know, there's, you know, excitement around it. But I just wondered, I was, you know, kind of unpicking that.
Yeah, I definitely got me curious about whether or not, you know, is he just super optimistic, so celebrates the highs like big, or is he quite open to seeing the threat on a prudent type scale as well as opportunities? And therefore, if there's a setback, the setback hits him really hard.
Yeah.
So if that happens, how does he manage his emotions to the athlete if the athlete doesn't do as well as they hoped? But interestingly, then, so you've got that bit around his kind of his mindset there, because it clearly affects his behaviours. And then, interesting, in the second time his athlete did well, it was a very much more muted celebration.
Oh, right.
Much quieter. But was that self-awareness? I recognise I've gone viral worldwide, and it doesn't look good. Or other coaches have had a word to say, look, you know, that might not be what we're looking to portray as the coaching support force around. We won't know, right? But
yeah,
it was interesting to see that there was definitely a shift in his behaviours for his second athlete.
And but that is really interesting. I can't wait to look that up. And I just wonder, the tipping point, like, so we see loads of coaches cheering, fist pumping, running to the athletes, squeezing, hugging, all of this. But the fact that he went into the next and started kind of intimidating the one beside him and shaking the stuff, it was a little bit on the tipping scale for me, in the behavior. But like you said, get more context around it. He muted it the second time. So he's obviously got a good network of people around him, or had a little bit of a reflection himself to go, whoa, let's
Mm,
let's reduce that,
yeah,
not to say that we can't celebrate, but yeah, that was a really interesting one.
yeah. So take that down to grassroots sport, local coaches, you
Mhm.
know, cup semi-final, final, those kind of things with a group of, under 12s or whatever it might be. How is that acceptable coaching behavior there, or is it just our bias of what acceptable coaching behavior should look like?
The bias, and that's always a great angle. I think I'm more, so the things I'm tuning in on when you're saying that, thinking of the grassroots and 12, is what are the words that are coming out with that hype? Are you dialing up and dialing down at the right time because of what they need? So is it a little bit of excitement to get, person A, B, and C moving a little bit? Or are we encouraging then other people, so the players in the team, to see this representative behavior on the sideline, side of track pool, and thinking, well, I should do that because that's acceptable and that's my role model at the moment? Or parents seeing it, and then it's our perceived interpretation of the gestures. So this being a cheer, or this being a critique, or, back to the body language, which, it's specific for each person, isn't it? But like, yeah, we've seen and discussed and dissected a number of different behaviors and sideline.
Mm,
And I think it's the language marry with that. Because if it's a woohoo, and it's, or if it's a press and it's really loud and vocal and it's just a one, burst cue, maybe that could be impactful. But if it's the constant jumping and hyping, then how are you accommodating the athletes that can't cope with that level of hype? And, so it's
yeah,
an
yeah.
interesting.
And I think possibly also, especially when you get into those teenage, young adolescent years, kids are really cautious of other people's behaviors around them in
Mm,
terms of putting a spotlight and causing them embarrassment.
yeah, absolutely.
And often as adults, we do that to kids.
Yeah.
Um, I remember a kid saying to me when I was doing a piece of research a few years back, it was a group of under 12s, and was talking about the impact of parents shouting at kids during sport.
Oh, wow.
And I said to him, well, how does it make you feel? And I remember he described it to me. He said, everything goes dark. And he said, it is a spotlight just entirely on me in the game. And like, wow, what's the impact of that on the kid's well-being, on his performance,
Mm.
on just his confidence, like just huge things. But we don't recognize the impact of that.
No, and then knowing the stuff that Gordon McLennan has done and Richard Shorter and a lot of other people around the parent side, it's having those conversations to see, because some kids might be really proud that their parents are there and giving an odd boost every so often, but then having those conversations around, actually that makes me feel really uncomfortable, or can you not come today, or
Mm,
like, it's funny, yeah, that's a really interesting one.
yeah, I definitely don't want to be that parent.
No, I'm sure you're not.
She'll try not to be. Well, no, I won't. And then I suppose the other thing that kind of jumped out around the games, and I feel slightly bad because I don't want to give this airtime, but a particular journalist, sensationalist, who talked about in the media, if you don't win gold, what's the point? What do you make of Piers Morgan's comments?
Oh, it just roiled me up this morning, because he's obviously bored at home and just trying to stir a pot. That's where I'm at in my head. And I was going to reply, and the reply I had in my head, not the Piers actually knows me or would actually care at all what I have to say, and nor do I care what he's saying there, but it is annoying me. So yes, gold matters. Yes, medal matters. 2, 3, 4th, 5th, and 6th matters. Making a final matters. Going to the Olympics, like, it all matters. It's how, you know like, I guess some of the commentary and narratives on some sport. And
Mm,
I know Gabby Logan was pulled up in a comment on Twitter the other day around, oh, the sadness of fourth. And she kind of said, listen, it's the bittersweet. That's what I meant. You don't need to dig it really deep. It's just off podium. People will be striving for that. It still is fourth place in the Olympics. And I acknowledge that. So I think the well element, again, just kind of antenna going up there. It's just celebrating people getting to that level. Now, some of our
mm,
sports, I say that I have been scorned by my Irish counterparts for the GB element, but some of the sports, from a GB perspective, have been not scorned, but have been negatively spotlighted for not being as successful as they thought they were going to be. And I'm like, hold up a minute here. You have athletes absolutely busting a gut to be there, this is their job, their aspiration for the last 5 years.
mm.
And I know there's a financial funding element to it, but holy God, let's come back to the well-being part of that. Let's come back to the dip that these athletes are going to experience when they come back. So yes, a gold medal, fantastic. But like, looking at, his name escapes me now, Charlotte's counterpart in the BMX winning bronze. Like,
Okay. Yeah.
oh, like, absolute beaming.
Mm,
Silver medals is so proud. And let's not us, but let's the general public and society not take that away from them. Oh my goodness. People coming back and going, oh, I only made a final, or I just missed a final. At the Olympics, bloody hell. So yeah, I had a lot to say about that this morning on my dog walk when I was furiously pounding the keys of my phone. But yeah.
yeah. I heard the interview with the Irish pommel horse lad, Reese, who would have been challenging or could have been challenging Max Whitlock.
Mhm.
And it didn't go as well as he'd hoped.
Yeah.
And his interview at the end, when he was clearly disappointed, for a 22-year-old to be as composed as he was, I thought was a huge credit to himself. And he talks about the fact that I'm an Olympic finalist.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time, certainly in a lot of the sports that I've been watching, you can't control whether you win or lose. You go out and have to perform, deliver something, whatever that something looks like. But you can't control whether someone else does it better in the opinion of somebody else, or does it quicker, or whatever it might be. So all you can do is focus on what you do. And there's been a lot more prevalence for me of people talking about the process that they've been through, the journey that they've been through, as opposed to the outcome. I've definitely seen that, a lot more focus on how they think they've done the performance, as opposed to whether it got me first, second, third, or fourth.
Yeah, that is amazing. And you want to encourage that. And listen, I'm insanely competitive, and I know, I know you have it in you as well.
No.
But isn't it nice for people to remind us of that? I am an Olympic finalist, or I've done something to represent my country, or I've experienced an Olympics that has been postponed by a year and now I've still made it. Or, I know a swimmer that I worked with a coach, and the swimmer had made the Olympics, and, absolutely fantastic, incredible. And up until Christmas of, I want to say it was last year, she hadn't done a PB in 3 years, in this one particular event. And the perseverance and resilience built up to get to that point, to then get a quota place in the team to go to the Olympics. How can we just maximize and celebrate that journey and not dilute it by, oh, but you didn't make, so it's interesting, really interesting. And I noticed as well, a couple of sports, when they're interviewing the athletes, Try is coming to mind at the moment, but there was definitely 4 or 5, is I've wanted this since I was younger. I knew at 8 years old, I'll tell my PE teacher, or I've told this person I was going to be an Olympian. So how cool it is, that's been a long time coming for a lot of people.
So I've got a question for you, just to follow up on that one. But I want to read you something first, because I want to get your response to this.
Yeah.
So Dr. Pippa Grange, who we both know is a super smart woman, and I think this might have come from some Brené Brown work that she did.
Okay.
So she talks about shallow wins versus deep wins. Okay. So shallow winning shallow is winning to avoid feeling not good enough or to beat the other person. We feel urgency and self-doubt. No matter what we achieve, we still doubt we're good enough. We're still not fulfilled because the shallow win is comparative and drives more scarcity. Why do I still feel bad? When will I win again? Right? Versus deep wins. Winning deep is not about the ego, it's driven by the soul. Oh, I love that sentence.
Yeah.
We can feel the richness of the win, even the small ones, because we are connected to the joy, the struggle, and even the mess. There's wild desire in the deep win. It's less domesticated. You feel the deep win achievements because they're often connected to something outside of you.
Are they, if we go back to say earlier in their cycle, pre-event, pre-Olympics, are they training to just not lose? And have they got wrapped up in the journey so much so that they miss the fun of it? You know, does the fun come into the little goals that are set? And, you know, is it now a big weight off their shoulder if they finish something or complete the Olympics, but then linking to the what's next? I don't know if you watched the Naomi Osaka
No, I haven't.
yet. Like, just really, I don't know, an emotional wreck this August, July, but there's just some really poignant moments where she's on to the what's next. And you can see over the it's a 3-part docuseries, you can see over there that a little bit of the what's next, but her personality seeping through, like a little bit of interest in fashion and, you know, using her platform for kind of social impact. But some that kind of comes, those shallow wins kind of come in there. That's really interesting. I'll have to get a snapshot of that and pop it in.
Yeah, excellent. I think there's also a real shift from some of the stuff that I've seen that, and it's welcomed, I think. You know, Simeone Biles talking openly about not being in the right place to do things. And interesting, I've spoken to some kind of people that work in gymnastics, and it's a similar thing in diving and in trampolining. The twisties, you know, when you're starting to think about what you're doing midair, it's a pretty dangerous place to be, as opposed to unconsciously doing something because you've been able to do it many, many times. And they likened it to like those of us that can drive, and going back to that stage where you can't really drive, you're not very good at driving, but you're doing a merge onto a motorway at 70 miles an hour with a lot of fast moving traffic, and all of a sudden you can't remember how to drive, and you've got to think about what your feet are doing, what your hands are doing. And that's what this athlete said, that's the twisties, which when you're trying to think about that in midair, you know, you're potentially going to kill yourself. And the fact that she was able to come out and speak up about it. And then I think this week we've had Ben Stokes in the cricket saying just needs to take a break to mentally recharge. Adam Peaty doing a similar thing now post games. I think, you know, for people that don't live in that elite sport environment, I don't think they realize how tough it is.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But okay, so 2 things. One of them, isn't it brilliant that they're talking?
Oh, 100%.
There's so much negativity
Absolutely.
out there and so many keyboard warriors having an opinion on what someone else should do. Is it an excuse? Are we? Oh my goodness, the absolute rubbish I've heard. The other side is maybe looking across different industries. You know, is this a opening door space for them to say, hey, you could try it, you know, you could put some stuff in place where you can speak openly about mental health and well-being across industries that, I don't know why the finance industry is coming to mind at the moment, but thinking of like this, you know, down on the floor and the stocks and the long hours that people work, like, is there something around the shift there that could be done so people can speak more about mental health and taking a pause and stepping away from something that isn't, as a job, that isn't helping their life, isn't, you know, enhancing the quality of who they are. Yes.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
I did some work with a law firm once, one of these random things I end up doing. And we were talking about the importance of vulnerability and reflection. And they just said culturally, they cannot show any vulnerability. So reflection isn't typically something that's done in a way that suggests, oh, I might have not got that right, because it's then seen as a sign of weakness. Wow. And I'm like, wow, we're just having people aren't going to move forward, but what's the impact on people's mental health?
Yeah.
And especially when this particular place that I was in at the time, you know, the office had everything, so you never had to leave the office. They had beds, they had a laundry, they had a takeaway. Like they literally had everything. So if you had to work for a week solidly on a case and never go home, you just lived in the office. I'm like, wow. I mean, that's a tough place.
Yeah. And it's accepted within the culture. So thinking of
Mm.
across back into sports and in multiple industries, when you're in the middle of it, do you know how toxic it is?
Well, I mean, look, let's pick this one up on in 6 months' time when you've had 6 months in that elite football environment,
Mm.
and it can consume you.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
really hard, and thankfully you're of sound of mind sensibly at the moment to be able to push back. But
At the moment.
yeah,
Yeah, no.
yeah, how you keep doing that so you don't just do what everybody else does and you end up doing these 70-hour weeks.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I think that's thinking of my own role and think of the conversations I've had with coaches in the last 3-4 years. The boundaries part of this is going to be really important, and setting kind of those boundaries really early and
yeah.
understanding where my passion lies, but also where the remit is in that boundary line of, you know, I will have a work phone, so I'll make sure I turn that off at certain times and days and take my day off to be a day off or 2 days off, and have
Mm.
the space to download and the reminder, and I'll have great people around me as well to help, but the reminder that I can be more creative and I can be more available and more present if I am fully recharged. So yeah. Wow. Full circle. Here we go.
Mm.
Another episode 9 done. At Coach Convo on Twitter, that's where we're at. You can see the link below to coachconversation@gmail.com. If you have any email comments that you'd like to share, you can pop them along to that address. We will look forward to hearing your comments and hope you enjoyed the show today, and have a great week, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.